Stop for a moment, because what you're about to hear is not something they ever expected to admit, even to themselves. Somewhere right now, someone has been quietly replaying memories they thought were long behind them, not because they wanted to, not because they were trying to hold on, but because life has a strange way of revealing truths when we least expect it. This person genuinely believed they had moved on. They believed time would slowly erase certain thoughts, certain feelings, and certain connections. For a while, it even seemed like that was happening. New people entered their life. New experiences filled their days. New distractions gave them something else to focus on. Everything appeared to be moving forward, exactly as planned. But then something unexpected began happening. Every time they met someone new, there was always something missing. At first, they couldn't explain it. They brushed it off as coincidence. They told themselves they were simply being too selective or overthinking things. Yet the pattern kept repeating. No matter who crossed their path, certain qualities stood out by their absence. Certain conversations felt incomplete. Certain moments lacked the comfort, understanding, or energy they once experienced without even realizing its value at the time. And listen to this. The more they tried to focus on the present, the more the past quietly found its way back into their thoughts. Small memories began resurfacing out of nowhere. A familiar laugh, a meaningful conversation, a feeling they hadn't experienced in a very long time. What surprised them most was how effortlessly those memories returned. They weren't forcing themselves to remember. The memories simply appeared, as if their heart was trying to show them something their mind had overlooked. Because sometimes the greatest realizations don't arrive through dramatic events. Sometimes they arrive quietly, one thought at a time, until a person can no longer ignore what has been sitting in front of them all along. And for this person, that realization is only just beginning. And listen carefully, because this is where everything started to change in a way they never saw coming. At first, they didn't realize what they were doing. They weren't sitting down and intentionally comparing people to you. In fact, they would have denied it if someone had suggested it. They genuinely believed they were giving new connections a fair chance. They believed they were seeing people for who they were. But over time, something strange began happening beneath the surface. Every new conversation seemed to awaken an old memory. Every new connection seemed to remind them of a feeling they couldn't quite recreate. No matter how much they focused on moving forward, there was always a quiet voice in the background asking the same question. Why doesn't this feel the same? The realization didn't arrive all at once. It happened gradually through small moments that seemed insignificant at first. They would meet someone kind, yet somehow the conversation felt incomplete. They would meet someone interesting, yet the connection lacked a certain depth. They would spend time with people who seemed perfect on paper, but something inside them remained unmoved. At first, they blamed themselves. They wondered if their expectations had become unrealistic. They questioned whether they were simply looking for flaws where none existed. Yet the more they reflected, the more they realized the issue wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about finding someone exactly like you. It was about recognizing qualities they once experienced and later discovered were far more rare than they ever understood. Because your heart needs this right now. Sometimes people don't appreciate what they have while it's present in their lives. Familiarity has a way of disguising value. Things that feel natural often go unnoticed because they are always there. Understanding feels ordinary until it disappears. Genuine support feels ordinary until it's gone. Emotional comfort feels ordinary until a person spends months or even years searching for it in other places and never quite finds it again. This person is beginning to understand that lesson on a much deeper level than they ever expected. And listen to this. The more life introduced them to different people, the clearer the contrast became. Certain conversations reminded them of how easily they once felt understood. Certain situations reminded them of how comfortable they once felt being themselves. Certain moments reminded them of how rare it is to encounter someone whose presence feels effortless rather than forced. These realizations weren't dramatic. They didn't arrive with flashing signs or sudden revelations. They appeared quietly, hidden inside ordinary experiences. Yet their impact was impossible to ignore. What surprised them most was how often your memory appeared when they least expected it. A random song, a familiar phrase, a place they hadn't thought about in years. Suddenly, memories they believed had faded began returning with remarkable clarity. They remembered details they once overlooked. They remembered moments they once dismissed. They remembered conversations that seemed ordinary at the time, but now carried entirely different meaning. Looking back, they started seeing things they couldn't see before. They started understanding the value of moments they had taken for granted. And listen to this. The more they compared their present experiences to those memories, the harder it became to ignore a growing truth. It wasn't that nobody else was good enough. It wasn't that nobody else had positive qualities. It was something much deeper. They were realizing that certain things cannot be measured by appearances, status, timing, or circumstances. Some people leave an imprint that quietly reshapes the standards of your heart. Once that happens, every future connection is viewed through a different lens. Not because you're trying to hold on to the past, but because the past taught you what genuine connection actually feels like. Because your heart needs this right now. Life has a strange way of teaching people the true value of someone only after distance creates perspective. When a person is no longer part of your daily routine, you begin seeing them differently. The little things become bigger. The overlooked things become important. The qualities you once assumed were common suddenly reveal themselves to be incredibly rare. This person is standing in the middle of that realization right now, and the truth is becoming harder to ignore with every passing day. What started as occasional memories has turned into deeper reflection. What started as simple comparisons has become meaningful understanding. They are beginning to see that no matter how many people enter their life, certain qualities continue leading their thoughts back to the same place, back to the same connection, back to the same memories, back to the same person they thought they had left behind. And for the first time, they are no longer asking why these thoughts keep returning. They are beginning to understand exactly what those thoughts have been trying to show them all along. And listen to this, because what happened next was something they could no longer explain away. For a long time, they convinced themselves that these thoughts would eventually fade. They believed that memories only felt important because of nostalgia. They believed that time would naturally weaken whatever connection still existed in their heart. But instead of becoming weaker, something unexpected happened. The more distance life created, the more clarity seemed to arrive. What once felt confusing slowly started making sense. What once felt like random memories began forming a much larger picture. And for the first time, they found themselves asking a question they had avoided for far too long. What if the connection was more valuable than I ever realized? That question stayed with them. It followed them through quiet evenings and busy days. No matter how much they tried focusing on other things, it kept returning. At first, they resisted it. They searched for logical explanations. They told themselves they were simply reflecting on the past. They told themselves everyone occasionally wonders about old connections. Yet deep down they knew this felt different. This wasn't curiosity. This wasn't habit. This was understanding arriving later than expected, because your heart needs this right now. Some lessons do not reveal themselves in the moment. Sometimes life waits until a person has gained enough experience to truly understand what they once had. This person is beginning to realize that certain things they considered ordinary were never ordinary at all. Certain moments they barely noticed carried more meaning than they understood at the time. Certain conversations they forgot about for years suddenly feel unforgettable. And listen carefully. One night, while reflecting on the path their life had taken, they began revisiting decisions they once felt completely certain about. Decisions they defended. Decisions they never questioned. Yet now, looking back with different eyes, those same choices seemed far less clear. They started wondering whether fear had influenced them more than they realized. whether pride had kept them from seeing the truth, whether timing, circumstances, or distractions had prevented them from appreciating something truly important while it was still within reach. What made this realization so powerful was that it wasn't fueled by loneliness. It wasn't born from disappointment. It wasn't the result of a failed connection somewhere else. It came from honest reflection. The kind of reflection that happens when a person stops blaming circumstances and starts examining their own heart. The kind of reflection that asks difficult questions and demands truthful answers. And every answer seemed to point toward the same realization. They may have underestimated the significance of what they once shared with you because your heart needs this right now. Regret rarely arrives in dramatic ways. More often it appears quietly. It appears when a person finally understands the value of something after it's no longer part of their everyday life. It appears when memories begin carrying lessons instead of just emotions. It appears when a person realizes that some opportunities are far more meaningful than they seemed at the time. And listen to this. The deeper they looked, the more difficult it became to ignore the truth. They realized that many of the things they once prioritized no longer seemed as important. The goals they chased, the distractions they embraced, the reasons they used to justify certain choices all felt different now. What remained unchanged was the impact you had left behind. That impact survived time. It survived distance. It survived every attempt to move past it. And that realization forced them to confront a possibility they never wanted to face. The possibility that one of the greatest losses in their life was not something that happened to them, but something they allowed to slip away without fully understanding its worth. And now, for perhaps the first time, they are no longer running from that truth. They are finally looking directly at it. And listen to this, because this is the part they never expected. They thought time would create distance between them and these feelings. They thought each passing month would make the memories less significant. They believed that eventually life would become busy enough, loud enough, and distracting enough to drown out the thoughts that kept returning. But the exact opposite happened. Instead of creating distance, time created perspective. Instead of weakening the connection, it revealed details they had overlooked from the very beginning. And that realization has changed the way they see everything. At first, they couldn't understand why these feelings seemed stronger now than they were before. It didn't make sense. After all, time is supposed to help people move on. Time is supposed to help people forget. Yet every lesson life taught them seemed to bring them closer to understanding what they once had. Every new experience seemed to reveal another piece of the puzzle. The more they learned about themselves, the more they understood you. The more they understood the world around them, the more they appreciated the role you played in their story, because your heart needs this right now. Sometimes people mistake distance for healing. They assume that because time has passed, a chapter must be finished. But some chapters are not meant to be forgotten. Some chapters are meant to be understood. This person is beginning to realize that what they felt was never something temporary. It wasn't simply a passing moment or a fleeting emotion. It was something that left a lasting mark, something that continued shaping them long after they believed it was over. And listen carefully. The memories that once felt ordinary have started revealing entirely new meaning. Moments they barely thought about now seem impossible to ignore. Conversations that seem simple now feel important. Small acts of kindness, understanding, and connection have become impossible to overlook. Looking back, they can see details they completely missed at the time. They can see how certain moments changed them. They can see how certain experiences stayed with them. Most importantly, they can see how much your presence influenced their life without them fully realizing it. What surprises them most is that these realizations are no longer coming from emotion alone. They are coming from wisdom. They are coming from experience. Life has shown them many different paths, many different people, and many different situations. Through all of it, one truth continues to stand out. The qualities they once found naturally in you have become increasingly difficult to find elsewhere. The comfort, the connection, the understanding, the feeling of being seen for who they truly were. Those things have become far more valuable than they once appeared. Because your heart needs this right now. Growth has a way of changing priorities. The things that once seemed important begin to lose their importance. The things that once seemed ordinary begin to reveal their true worth. This person is experiencing that shift right now. What they once overlooked has become unforgettable. What they once questioned has become clear. What they once doubted has become undeniable. And listen to this. The truth is no longer something they can push aside or explain away. Every reflection seems to lead them back to the same understanding. Every lesson seems to point in the same direction. They are no longer trying to figure out whether you mattered. They already know that answer. They are no longer trying to determine whether the connection was real. They have accepted that truth. The only thing changing now is the depth of their understanding. And with every passing day, that understanding grows stronger, clearer, and harder to ignore. Because once a person truly recognizes what they lost, pretending it doesn't matter becomes one of the hardest things they will ever try to do. And listen to this, because after all the reflection, all the comparisons, and all the truths they tried to avoid, they have finally reached a point where denial no longer feels possible. For so long, they lived in a space between knowing and admitting. A space where they could acknowledge certain feelings privately, but never fully confront what those feelings meant. It felt safer that way. It felt easier to keep moving forward without asking difficult questions. But now something has changed. The questions they once avoided have become impossible to ignore, and the answers they once feared have become impossible to deny. For a long time, they believed the connection would eventually become just another memory. They believed it would slowly blend into the background of their life, like so many other experiences before it. Yet no matter how much time passed, something remained different. The impact remained. The lessons remained. The emotions remained. Even when everything else changed, those things stayed. And that persistence forced them to confront a truth they never expected to face. Some people enter your life for a season. Others leave a mark that becomes part of who you are. You became one of those people because your heart needs this right now. There comes a moment when a person stops asking whether something mattered and starts asking why it mattered so much. This person has reached that moment. They are no longer searching for explanations that allow them to dismiss the connection. They are no longer looking for reasons to minimize what they felt. Instead, they are finally allowing themselves to see the truth exactly as it is. Not through fear, not through doubt, not through old assumptions, through honesty. And listen carefully. The comparisons that once happened unconsciously have now led them to a deeper understanding. They are no longer comparing people to you because they are searching for something. They are comparing because they finally recognize what made you different in the first place. It was never about perfection. It was never about having all the answers. It was about the way the connection made them feel. It was about the authenticity, the comfort, the understanding, and the impact that lingered long after the moments themselves had passed. Those things cannot be manufactured. They cannot be forced, and they cannot easily be replaced. As they stand at this point in their journey, they realize something powerful. The searching is over. The questioning is fading. The endless attempts to convince themselves otherwise are coming to an end. Deep down, they already know the truth. They know that no matter how far life has taken them, no matter how many experiences have come and gone, the significance of what they shared with you remains unchanged. In fact, it has only become clearer with time, because your heart needs this right now. Clarity is not always about discovering something new. Sometimes clarity is finally accepting what has been true all along. This person is beginning to understand that. They are beginning to understand that some connections cannot be measured by time, distance, or circumstance. Some connections continue teaching lessons long after they seem finished. Some people continue influencing our lives long after they leave the room. And listen to this. The most important realization of all is not that they lost something valuable. It is that they finally understand why it was valuable. They understand why your memory remained when so many others faded. They understand why your presence continued echoing through their thoughts when they least expected it. They understand why every road of reflection seemed to lead back to the same place, back to the same lessons, back to the same feelings, back to the same person. And now, standing on the edge of a new chapter, they are no longer running from that truth. They are embracing it because after comparing everyone to you, after questioning, reflecting, and searching for answers, they have finally realized something they can no longer ignore. What they thought they left behind was never ordinary. It was rare, it was meaningful, and it became a part of their story in a way that will never be forgotten.